Welcome to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show where we discuss all things political, local and national and global in a fair and balanced manner. I am Rueben Abati. I'm Rueben Abati, your host for This Day Live, the Sunday talk show. Let me introduce our guest today. With me here in Lagos is Teriba, the CEO of Economic Associates and an economist. You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
And joining me live from our studios in Abuja, we have Bolaji Adebiyi, the deputy editor of This Day newspaper. We also have Iyobosa Uwugiaren, who is also an editor with This Day. Iyobosa, good to have you on the program.
Thank you very much.
All of you, we've got a lot to talk about today, so let's get started. So much has happened within the week in Nigeria and elsewhere. The United Nations said 3 Borno local government areas are inaccessible and many others are partially accessible as a result of terrorist attacks. A director hanged himself in Kogi over 11 months unpaid salary arrears. 12 years after, Southern governors to reconvene in Lagos tomorrow. Wike, the governor of Rivers State, has accused the federal government of weakening the justice system in the country. 219 retired Biafra police officers have been given their pension in Enugu. Kebbi Appeal Court jailed a 70-year-old man who is an accountant general for fraud. Intel has apologized to the federal government and promised to comply with the Treasury single account regulations. Evans, the notorious kidnapper, has changed his plea to not guilty. The governor of Anambra State has opened up, alleged his predecessor demanded 7.7 billion naira from him. President Buhari has signed fresh deal with Turkey on counter-terrorism. The federal government has also arraigned Senator Misau for raising false allegation. Former President Jonathan said President Buhari is not trusted by Nigerians, but that Nigerians fear him. On the 2019 presidency, the APC said no discussion yet on automatic ticket. Former President Jonathan met with former President Babangida in Minna. Ganiyu Adams, the OPC leader, is now the new Are Onakakanfo of Yoruba land. The court ordered Senator Abati to produce Kanu. The presidency has also blamed the People's Democratic Party for restructuring agitation, for the agitation over restructuring in Nigeria. Investigative journalists killed in Malta. The WHO, the World Health Organization, has appointed President Mugabe as goodwill ambassador, and many more.
They've revoked it.
Now, they've revoked that, but that was the news, of course, during the week. Now, we go to some of the issues. We start with Intel. Intel says it intends to comply with the directive of the federal government of Nigeria to transfer all the revenue to the Treasury single account. Gabriel Volpi, the majority shareholder in Intel, says the organization is a law-abiding one, and so we cooperate with the government and the Ports Authority in developing the maritime sector, along with the Badagry Seaport in Lagos. Apologizing for the breakdown of talks between the Ports Authority and Intel, Volpi disclosed that it was not part of the failed negotiation that led to the termination of the pilotage agreement. Intel earlier said it was going to challenge government's action in court and threatened to withdraw its investment plans in Nigeria. This is the latest development on this matter. We discussed it last week, but it keeps getting more and more interesting. Now, you have been watching the economy before our guys in Abuja join us. What does this all mean?
Right, well, after refusing to comply and leading to a boiling point in which the federal government terminated their contract, And some people were raising issues of fairness to investors. The latest development vindicates the federal government that Intel should not have been recalcitrant in the first place. Laws are made to be respected. It's good that the majority shareholder is coming out to dissociate himself from the attitude of not wanting to respect Nigerian government directive. You can't make exception for any company if this is how government wants things, especially since your contract makes you an agent of the government. You are collecting the revenue on behalf of the government. So you should let the money go to the TSA first, and then your own share will be given to you. I think all banks would respect that.
Well, Iyobosa, this controversial Intel's affair, this latest statement from Gabriel Volpe, is it not an afterthought?
Well, I want to believe that. Well, it is part of the ongoing conversation to resolve the issue. In the first place, I think the termination of the contract by the Nigerian Port Authority was not in order, because there were controversy from the Nigerian Port Authority and Intel about the fact that Intel claimed NPA was owing it about $840 million. And the Nigerian Port Authority also claimed that the Intel also refused to remit the money collected on his behalf to the Treasury account. I think because there was a contractual agreement between Nigerian Port Authority and Intel, there ought to be a due process, even if you want to terminate the contract, before you do that. I think from the latest information from the Intel, it is obvious that they are ready to review the matter. They are ready to review the issue and see how they can amicably resolve the controversies already in the termination of the contract in the first place.
Is this about resolving the matter amicably or ensuring that public interest is served? Bolaji?
Well, that's my own, that's what I've also been thinking about. If there is a policy of government, shouldn't private companies, that are involved or that are expected to obey those policies, obey the policy? Now, I wonder how we came to this. The federal government had a policy that all its revenue should be paid into a single account called Treasury single account. I expect that everybody that is involved in collecting revenue will simply comply with that policy of government. Now, the government said it has terminated the contract. Now, I wonder how an apology from the company we make government to reverse itself, if government indeed believe that there has been a breach of policy. But I agree with Iyobosa that there ought to be a process by which contracts are terminated if any party is in breach of such a contract. I think that what has happened also goes to show how untidy our oversight, how government takes its oversight responsibilities.
Go further and say this is really a comment on even how the Nigerian state is organized. Because if you raise the issue about oversight, there are probably similar situations in other sectors of the economy.
I'd like to chip in.
Well, you wanted to say something about
this issue, I do not think that we should be discussing process issues there. Yeah. It did not happen overnight. There has been a lot of correspondence between government and Intels. It might have been an issue for a year or more, with consequences for the flow of investment at the ONE facility. We were talking about the action of the government against Intels affecting investors, but the action of Intels itself probably had negative consequences for investors. So however they arrived at this point, they've arrived at a point where their contract has been terminated. The key question going forward is, will it be an apology? Will an apology be all that it will take for the federal government to change its mind? A contract stands terminated. So the key question is, will the government say, okay, because you apologize, because you are ready to comply,
we just move on.
We lift the
I think Bolaji made a similar
or this is where the process issue will now come in. So do we need to also follow due process in reconsidering, their stand?
Yeah. Well, Bolaji and Iyobosa, both of you have been monitoring the political situation in Nigeria. There is a political dimension to this that some people have tried to define, to say, look, this is not just something that has been done honestly by government, but there is an attempt to punish certain persons politically. Do you share that view?
Well, first and foremost, let me make comment on the issue of apology. Was there really any apology from the Airtel in the first place? Because if you look, I think that should be the interpretation of the letter by some section of the media. Because if you look at the letter, if you look at the content of the letter, Airtel was saying that they were not part of the negotiation, the conversation that led to the termination of the contract in the first place. So if they are saying that, I don't see them also apologizing in the same letter. I think the apology is the interpretation of some media. Having said that, you also raise the issue of the political dimension to it, where the issue of the former vice president keep up popping up over the issue. But I also want to believe that some time ago, there was a media report that the former vice president diverged from the company, and so the percentage he was holding in that company to another powerful politicians.
A part of it, I thought I read.
Sorry?
I thought what they said was that he divested a part of his shares, not the entire shareholding.
Okay, not the entire share. Yeah. So the point I'm making is that I don't see, to some extent, I don't see any political dimension to the whole issue, because if you are making reference to the former vice president, and the same vice president came up some time ago that it has little or nothing to do with the company again. So why are we still making reference to the former vice president? Well, if there are political dimensions, I'm not in a position to say that now. But from the look of things, I don't think there's any political dimension to it.
You want to make a comment on this?
Well, I think, the way things are in the country, there's a tendency for us to read politics into virtually everything. We know that the former Vice President, Abubakar Atiku, had interest in Intel. In fact, he was a co-founder. But I know that this day reported some time ago, that he had divested his interest. But even those interests were also taken over by another, APC stalwarts, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who is also said not to be too happy with the way things are going. So I think that a combination of both the interest of Atiku and that of Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu may have made the media to begin to read political meanings into what is going on. Well, it is not impossible, but what I think is more important is that, there is the issue of process. If the federal government has a policy, everybody, every citizen, whether corporate or individuals, should abide by those policies because they have a force of law. So as it is, there might be political considerations, but the fact is that a policy is a policy and it has to be abided with.
Come back to you before we move on to the next subject.
Right.
What is more important in this, politics or the economy? Or
the facts, particularly going by the exchange between Intel and the government. The DG of the MPA has come out to say that she has offered assurances that once the funds are remitted, Intel will get its share within 7 days. So we will be ignoring the facts if we begin to read more into the situation than what they have dragged and they were unable to resolve, and it led to the termination of the contract. There might be other issues, and there certainly will be other issues in which they were not, getting cooperation, from Intel. But this was what the last straw that broke the camel's back. So I would say we shouldn't, people who are suggesting that reading political meanings to it are entitled to their opinion. But you can only be entitled to your own opinion. You can't be entitled to your fact. So the fact of the issue is about, remittances to TSA.
And hopefully, if there are other companies like Intel that are not remitting to the Treasury single account,
yes,
the federal government will also
an issue of apology or no apology. Intel had previously demonstrated that they were unwilling to comply. They wanted an exception to the TSA. Now turning around to say they are ready to comply. It's apologetic. Whether you are reading in their letter an explicit apology or no apology is apologetic.
Well, the easiest thing is to apologize in Nigeria and blame the devil. Well, the federal government of Nigeria says it will soon release the names of all looters of the Nigerian Treasury. According to the Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami, the president has already directed relevant agencies to compile the names. The Federal High Court had in July ordered the government to release details of funds recovered from high-ranking public officials and the circumstances under which the funds were recovered. The judgment was delivered by Justice Adiza Shagari following a Freedom of Information suit by SERA, an NGO, compelling the government to do so. The same issue again, right? Looters of the Nigerian Treasury. What's your opinion?
Well, my opinion is that this should have been the situation all along. If you have names of looters, why keep it secret? Who are you? Why do you want to protect them? So there's no question, but that's the right thing to do. If the government does have the list, then make it public. It's simple.
Yeah, but Bolaji, it looks like the key issue really is about disclosing the funds that have been recovered. And I guess that those who are asking for disclosure are also insisting on accountability. Not so?
Interest is more about the funds that government said it had recovered. I'm not too sure that Nigerians are interested in who has returned what. However, we need to note that the president had said earlier that the list of those who had returned money or who they termed as looters, will be released. And then after some time, they renege on that, given legal reasons. I think that, it is part of the federal government's tendency, to engage in a policy somersault. If you say that people have returned money, to you, you should not have any inhibitions releasing, the list of those people who had returned the money and how much they had returned. And I think that the judgment of the court was very clear. It says, release the list of those who you said had returned money to you or who you said had looted, the Treasury. So I think that the federal government has a responsibility, to release the list.
Iyobosa, this looks straightforward, not so.
I don't have problem with naming and shaming the so-called looters. But my take is that is the federal government or the Attorney General of the Federation in a position to determine who the looters are? Because there are people they accuse of looting the state treasury, and they are in court with them. They are in a court with them. Now, if you are in a court with those so-called looters, and there's no competent court of law that has pronounced them guilty. Is it proper for the federal government to now tag those people as looters? I think the federal government needs to be very careful here so that you don't accuse innocent person or you don't call an innocent person a looter. I want to believe that until a competent court of law determine whether the person is guilty or not, the Attorney General or the presidency is not in a position to determine who looters are. That is my take on that.
See, he's raising, Iyobosa is raising an interesting point here, which is the thing that we get to see almost on a daily basis in Nigeria. People are paraded and they are labeled as guilty even before a court takes a decision. Whereas the law says a man is innocent until proven guilty. But I saw you shaking your head.
Yeah. Well,
you don't agree with
we
that?
have to be careful here that any court proceeding, be it civil or criminal, is understood to be a trial, and that only the court can convict, right? I do not see any reason why you should keep the fact that somebody is being tried for corruption a secret.
No,
You don't need
That's
to
not
wait.
the issue.
Wait. You don't need
It's
to
the
wait.
labeling that he's talking about.
You don't need to wait until conviction before you make public. If the state has taken somebody to the court for trial for looting, the public deserves to know, because the funds that the person is being tried for belongs to the public. You don't need to protect somebody because he's in trial. The trial should be of interest to the public as well. I don't think that those court sessions are in secret.
But he's raising a point about trial by media.
No. It's not.
Conviction in the court of public opinion.
It's not conviction. You will say those people have been indicted and convicted. That's one list. Those people are under trial. Before you take somebody for trial, there is an indictment, but there's no conviction. So I don't think we should be keeping a secret of something that.
Iyobosa, I'm sure you are listening to Teriba here.
Yeah.
I'm sure you are listening to Teriba. Do you want to comment any further on this?
I don't quite agree with his position. You remember some time ago, a serving federal high court judge was accused by the EFCC of looting the state treasury. And as a matter of fact, the EFCC classified the serving judge as looter. But the person went to court, the judge went to court, and at the end of the day, a competent court of law ruled that the man was not guilty. In other words, the man is not a looter. So now, how do you reconcile that? And that's exactly what informed my position, that before you classify somebody as looter, let us follow the due process. You accuse somebody of looting the treasury. And the man said, no, I am not guilty. Let's go to the competent court of law who will decide whether the man is a looter or not. And I think that issue is resolved. The federal government or the Attorney General has no constitutional right to classify such persons as looter. I think that is my position. This idea of trying and condemning people on the pages of newspapers, on televisions and radio, I do not buy that idea. We're in a democracy. Nigeria is not a jungle. We're in a country that is governed by rule of law, and we must subscribe to that, whether we like it or not.
You have been in and out of government for many years. What's your position on this? I see you are laughing. Yeah.
Well, my position, well, I think that it is necessary for us to subject ourselves to the rule of law. That I agree. However, I think we need to separate the issues. The first is that the government had accused some people of looting and that it had recovered some money from them. Now, if you are accusing somebody of looting and that you have recovered money, if that is the case, then you may have to take them through the process of trial. Okay? So to that extent, I agree with Iyobosa. But government also said that some persons had voluntarily, returned money to government treasury. Now, I don't see any big issue in that one. if somebody on his own had returned money to the Treasury, then government should have no problems at all in announcing the names and the amounts. Now, indeed, government did say to us that it recovered, almost 800 and something billion naira. Okay, so I think those two issues should be separated. If you are accusing somebody of looting, then of course you take him through the process of trial, and then you get him convicted. Now, but for those you said had returned money voluntarily, I think that government, has a responsibility to tell us how much they collected and from who.
Yeah, and then let's go to South Africa.
Let me quickly return.
You make a point? Okay. Yes, Iyobosa.
Yes, I just want to quickly. I just wanted to quickly react to what Bolaji said. Now, if you say somebody refunded some money, is it right to classify such people as looters? Let me give you a classical example. There were some people who were given money to do certain job by the former president. And at the end of the day, the federal government said, oh, the money was meant for arms, buying of arms. And those guys were not aware. They were not aware that the money was meant for the buying of arms. And they were given money, such money, by the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to do certain job. And at the end of the day, the Office of the National Security Advisor said, no, you need to refund such money. And these people refunded the money in good faith. Now, is it now right for us, for the federal government, to classify such people as looters? I don't think so. I don't think so.
Well, we'll hold it there, and let's go to South Africa, where we have a similar situation. In South Africa, Parliament this week began an inquiry into alleged corruption at the highest levels of government. Whistleblowers and prominent officials are expected to be called to give evidence into what has become known as state capture. South Africa's ministers, tycoons, the president's son, and many other witnesses are likely to be summoned. And if they show up, greeted by members of parliament who will be investigating claims of a giant corruption conspiracy. The same issue in Nigeria, in South Africa. And it does look like President Zuma is particularly embattled. So what's your take on the South African situation?
Right.
Against the background, of course, that President Zuma was recently honored in Nigeria, in Imo State, where he got a statue of honor.
And he has recently been put on trial by his parliament, where they voted, Yes, it's the same issue as the one we had been discussing. Yeah. And it is that a trial is fair, both to the person being accused and to the general public. If he comes out of the trial process discharged and acquitted, it's fair. So you're already mentioning the names of the people they want to put on trial. That's how it's done all over the world. The public is intelligent enough to know that this person is only on trial. The fact that you are on trial does not mean that you have been labeled as a looter. It means that you have been accused, and so you don't have to, protect the identity of anybody that is on trial. If he's on trial, make it known that the person is on trial. We understand that unless convicted, the person remains innocent.
Well, this is a different kind of trial. I mean, we're talking about the president of South Africa. But Bolaji, do you see the possibility of a sitting Nigerian president at any time being tried for corruption?
The president of Brazil has been on trial. The president of South Korea has been on, and she was removed. So it was no big deal.
The president, the governor, the deputy governors,
have immunity.
They have immunity.
Yeah, right.
Well, would you like to see a situation where a Nigerian president goes through the kind of ordeal that President Jacob Zuma is facing?
Protected by the Constitution.
Certainly not. Well, I think under our Constitution, a serving president and a governor, and then vice president and deputy governors are immune from criminal trials. But of course, they could be investigated. The Supreme Court, decided that yes, you could investigate, a serving president, vice president, governor, and deputy governor, you can investigate them for criminal matters. However, you cannot bring them to court. Well, I think that there is some merit in the immunity clause because, for instance, in Nigeria, we tend to assert our rights, particularly our legal rights. And then you can imagine a situation where the president, or a serving president, has to go to court, virtually on a daily basis, to defend himself against criminal allegations. Now, I mean, a case in point is that of the president of the Senate, Dr. Bukola Saraki. You could see, I think that this gives us, some indication as to what could happen if the immunity, from criminal prosecution is withdrawn from the president and the governor. Bukola Saraki had to go to court, virtually every day for the period of his trial. And I still wonder how he was able to cope, managing criminal trial and then managing the Senate. So I think that there is some merit in it. However, I think that this case in South Africa, what is going on in South Africa should be, we should learn from it. Were it to be Nigeria, you will have found people going to courts, to stop even investigations, from happening. So my take is that, well, we don't need to remove the immunity clause. I do not envisage a situation where a serving president will be asked to come and answer criminal charges. But I think that investigation could be done, and then when he leaves office, then it could be brought, for trial.
Well, Iyobosa, what will you say about President Jacob Zuma? He seems to be so morally conflicted, and the entire South African society is divided right more or less down the middle about his case.
The case has been.
Come again.
I'm saying, what are your thoughts about President Jacob Zuma? He's so morally conflicted, his presidency has been so turbulent, and there are some South Africans who insist that his presidency is some kind of embarrassment, particularly to the African National Congress, ANC.
Well, I think it is a matter of matter of opinion. There are some people who do not see anything good with what President Jacob Zuma is doing, and they believe that he has, his moral right to continue to be president of South Africa has been smashed. Like I said, it's a matter of opinion. It's democracy in action, and let's see how the whole thing ends. Because the court process is on. What Zuma is trying to do now is to say, look, there is no basis for me to face those allegations, those criminal charges. Last week, the National Prosecuting Authority, which is like the Attorney General of the Federation, also said that it has up to November 30th to file another case on why he should not be prosecuted in competent court of law for alleged corruption charges. The process is ongoing, and let's see how the whole thing will end.
Well, we'll pause here for a short break. You are watching the Sunday Talk Show here on the Arise channel with me, Rueben Abati. We'll be right back.